as much of the economic data that we possibly can feed to you. Of course, you know we like the trading. We like to do live trading with you as well. So be sure to stick around. If you haven't already, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to do this for you. And let me hit you with a little bit of intro. Now, if you're just joining us, you probably could skip ahead about 10 or 15 minutes. You could see Jerome Powell doing his meeting. We're just getting started a little bit early to make sure everything is taken care of for you. So we want to make sure that we are ready and prepared for you, baby. We want to make sure that we have everything set up and ready to go, and it looks like we do. We are live, baby. Things are looking a-okay. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the chat. This will be recorded, so that way we can have future subscribers to join us. And be sure to check out the live chat from Fed Powell. It's coming out in about 10 more minutes. Let's see what we got here. We're just going to bring this up. We'll bring this up and we'll put this up right here, so that way you guys can see right where I'm going to be keeping an eye on things. Right here. What would be the best place? This is probably the best place. We'll take this. We'll minimize this here for you. And bring this, make this a little bit smaller. That way we can all see exactly what's going on in the overall market. You know you love to see it. I know I do. And there we go. We'll even make this a little bit bigger for you. There we go. Looking good. All right. Now we have my big head right here, which I'll minimize this once we get to moving. So that way it's just old Mr. Powell talking to you, and it's not my fat head. But he's going to be coming out here in a little bit. They're going to be getting started here real soon. And yeah, we'll make sure everything is taken care of, and you guys are getting to see at first hand exactly what's going on in the market. That's what you want to see. That's what we are all here for. So we know that the PMI data came out today, and the non-farm payroll employment came out today. The PMI that came out today was actually very beautiful. It was bad news for the overall economy, but that is good news for inflation, because Jerome Powell wants to see the supply management of things, the manufacturer kind of slow things down. He wants to see things to slow down. When we see that everybody's employed and everybody's making good wage and everybody's doing, it's sad to see it, but when you see that everybody is doing so stinking well, what'll happen here is everybody's spending money, right? If you got money, you're going to spend money, and that's exactly what we are seeing in the overall market. Lots of very, very good economy, lots of beautiful things happen in the overall market. When you see this happening, you can clearly tell that the supply is not going to keep up with the demand. And then that makes prices higher. That makes inflation sticky. We don't want inflation sticky. We want to bring inflation down to the Fed rate decision of 2%. And if we could do that, that would be beautiful for the overall market. That's too much light now. Let's go ahead and do this. Try this out. There we go. We want to make sure we bring that inflation down. Inflation can be very sticky. Now, when the PMI data and non-farm payroll data came out, we took a scream to the north side. We talked about this earlier about on the S&P 500, if we could bounce off of a 21-day moving average, which we did. It was a beautiful bounce off the 21-day moving average. It's exactly what we wanted to see here on LoFiTrader. A beautiful bounce. A beautiful bounce, baby. And we got that beautiful bounce. So, good to see it. So, let's see. Maybe we should do a Who we got in the chat here? Dan Bob. Bob Dan. I think he's with me. Dan Bob, good to see you, brother. Let's see what else we got going on here. Dan, make sure that my microphone's queued up. Make sure everything's sounding A-okay. I sure hope it is. Everything's looking good on my end. Make sure it sounds good. All right. Beautiful. All right, guys. So it looks like they're just getting set up right now for the Fed Powell speech. It's probably going to be just a little bit before they actually get going here. That gives us time to make sure that we are all set up and ready to rock ourselves. So that being said, let's just take a little peeky gander of everything that we got going on. It looks like we are all set up. I don't know if we want the tape here. I think we can get rid of the time and sales. That way we can bump this out. It's better to see the overall market conditions. We also could bring up the daily time frame here, which is always nice to see. Daily, this is the 21-day moving average that I was talking to you about before. We can mark it at 516.65 on the intraday chart. So 516.65 is actually a little lower than this. 516.65, so we're about right here. That is actually where the 21-day moving average is. Clearly we're up a lot higher than where that 21-day moving average is. It was a beautiful bounce, this push up higher. We do need a pullback, so now we need to find sustaining buying power or a bid in this area. If we can find a bid in that area, that would be beautiful for the overall market. So let's go ahead and make sure our volume is all the way up because we want to be able to hear old Papa Powell when he comes out to speak. He's addressing Stanford University. So we're going to see some of the big heads, the big wigs come out and ask Mr. Papa Powell some questions. And sometimes they're tough questions. Sometimes these guys, like the last interviewer, you could tell he was bored on the last interview that we watched. It was actually pretty atrocious to hear some of the questions. I didn't like how he was treating old Papa Powell like a puppet. Like, I know he is he's a service member to the people, but he would tell him, quote, "Say that again." No, Papa Powell, say that again to the camera. And I was just like, man, if I was Jerome Powell and somebody told me, no, say that again. No, you say that again to the camera. I'd be like, dude, no, pay attention the first time. Like it's either the interviewer was buying time or he was just really just a complete jerk of an interviewer. So I'm hoping to see a better interviewer, better questions from the people around him today. So Troy Wiseman, new to your channel, live, hi, from Arizona. Awesome, man. Well, good to see you, brother. Thanks for stopping in. Today we are doing the Fed Jerome Powell, like I like to call him, old Papa Powell. Papa Powell will be coming out today, and he should be giving us his annotations about what is to come in the overall market. So we need to make sure we can hear what's going on in this. I see there we go. They didn't have the sound on. All right. Well, it looks like we're starting, guys. If
thank you, Maria.
well, once Papa Powell starts talking, I will give him the mic. But right now, we are just going to let them get started. But I want to say thank you, Troy, for joining us. Go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe for me. If you want to see more, we try to bring all the news. We also do live trading. We do it all here, baby. And if you guys check the description, you can see I have a Discord. Everything's free here. Everything's free. We ain't going to charge you nothing. We're not going to ask for any money here. We just want you to be a part of the community. We just ask for your time. So be sure, guys, to check the description. But other than that, I think what we'll do is we'll let this play and we'll see how things roll out, okay? So enjoy yourselves. Thanks for joining us, and let's enjoy.
At that time was just how profoundly the demands on business and on organizational leaders would change. The speed of changes in technology, the political landscape, the expectation that business leaders would have to have a viewpoint and speak about societal issues, or at least would be expected to do that on a regular basis, as well as thinking about their own strategy and operations. And more broadly, increasing skepticism on both the left and the right in this country and in different parts of the world about capitalism and its ability to generate shared prosperity. And of course, education at the Stanford Business School is premised on the belief that organizations and markets and democratic institutions are a powerful force, perhaps the most powerful force to drive societal progress. And also on the belief that by preparing students as leaders, we can bring the ideas of our faculty to life and make a significant contribution to the world, or as we say, to to change the lives of our students and then have them go out and change organizations and change the world, as our motto goes. And during the pandemic, we developed the idea for the Business Governance Society Initiative with the idea that it would give us a chance to put the school at the forefront of emerging areas. So debates about free markets and governance and regulation, advances in technology, sustainability and energy transition, and in that way respond to the changes in the world and get ahead of them. And our goal, of course, was to bring our research and teaching to bear on those issues. That's what we do best. That's the school's core. And then to integrate them into how we think about leadership education. And in the last 2 years, that initiative already has generated new classes and new conferences, new workshops. It's supported more than 60 faculty research projects. It's led to the development of a leadership values survey that we now give to all of our incoming students and to our alumni starting this spring. It's fostered a strong partnership with the new Doerr School of Sustainability and other schools across campus. And one of the ambitions that we have had with the initiative was that we would be able to try to use the school, power of the school, to spark discussions among faculty and students and leaders from business and government and civil society. And this forum is very much in that spirit. And the idea for this forum actually came from a task force that I convened during the pandemic, led by Professor Ken Schatz and Jim Coulter, one of our alumni.
Adam, Bob, what's up, boys? Good to see you.
And friends of the school. Last week I went back and read the final report of that task force, which was articulating a vision for this business governance.
Go ahead and vote on the poll now, guys, before old Jerome Powell comes out and drops the mic. We want to know, is it going to sustain buying power, or are we going to head down? Let me know.
Focused on the school's role in promoting leadership responsibility, which is, of course, the title of this forum, and it focused on civil discourse. And this is written in the spring of 2021, and I'll just read you from the first three paragraphs of the report that was written at the time, and which I just thought was so apropos of the world we're living in today. The report said, the Stanford GSD must prepare students for the responsibilities of leadership. To be clear, preparing students for leadership does not mean prescribing a particular set of values. It's not our role to tell students the right answers to difficult questions about policy or the social responsibility of business. That is something they must decide for themselves based on their own values. But we do have a responsibility to make sure they thoughtfully engage with these questions and have the knowledge to make informed decisions. And I think that's a perfect introduction to today's event. We're not here to receive answers, but to learn something and engage in a discussion. And we're very fortunate to have some exceptional guests here today.
Exceptional,
yes. And to have an agenda that tackles a fascinating set of issues. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you all have a great day. And now, to get things started, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who's Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Jerome Powell, Chair of the Federal Reserve, was appointed in 2018. He has had quite an interesting 6 years at the helm of the Federal Reserve, as interesting as any Fed chair in recent memory.
There's our boy right there, old Papa Powell, lingering in the background.
20 or 30 years.
Look at him back there. He's ready.
He has guided the Fed with a sure hand through a global
Let's see how he looks.
Supply disruptions, an incredibly dramatic fiscal expansion, a lot of asset market volatility, first inflation of magnitude in many years, and somehow we've emerged with the U.S. economy continuing to create jobs and be the envy of the world. And that range of experience, as well as Chairman Powell's responsible leadership, make him a perfect first speaker for our event.
Andrew's bearish.
He is going to share some opening remarks, and then he's going to be joined on stage by Arvind Krishnamurthy. Arvind is the John Osterweiss Professor of Finance at the GSB, and he is himself an expert on asset markets, financial intermediation, and monetary policy.
All right, here we go, guys.
Chairman Powell.
Oh, Papa Powell, ladies and gentlemen. It is a beautiful sight to see. Will he be bullish or dovish in this situation? I'm excited for this one, guys. Thanks for joining us. Hit that like and subscribe for more, guys. We bring it all the news. Let's go, Powell.
comments on the economy and the road ahead for monetary policy before briefly discussing the Federal Reserve's monetary policy independence, and then joining Arvind Krishnamurthy for some discussion. So over the past year, inflation has come down significantly, but it's still running above the FOMC's 2% goal. In February, headline inflation was 2.5% over the past 12 months based on PCE index. A year ago it was 5.2. Core inflation, which excludes the volatile food and energy components, stood at 2.8% in February. A year ago it was 4.8%. So this is very welcome progress, but as you can see, the job of sustainably restoring 2% inflation is not yet done. Tight monetary policy continues to weigh on demand, particularly in interest-sensitive spending categories. Nonetheless, growth in economic activity and employment was strong in 2023, as real GDP expanded by more than 3%, and 3 million jobs were created, even as inflation fell substantially. This combination of outcomes reflects significant improvements in supply that offset to some extent the effects on demand of tighter financial conditions. The healing of global supply chains helped address pent-up demand for goods, particularly in sectors that had faced considerable shortages, such as autos. In addition, labor supply increased significantly thanks to rising participation among 25 to 54-year-olds, workers in their prime working years, as well as a strong pace of immigration. Recent readings on both job gains and inflation have come in higher than expected. The economy added in an average of 265,000 jobs per month in the 3 years through February, a faster pace than we have seen since last June. And the higher inflation data over January and February were above the low readings in the second half of last year. But these recent data do not, however, materially change the overall picture, which continues to be one of solid growth, a strong but rebalancing labor market, and inflation moving down toward 2% on a sometimes bumpy path. Labor market rebalancing is evident in many parts of the data, including quits, job openings, surveys of employers and workers, and the continued gradual decline in wage growth. On inflation, it is too soon to say whether the recent readings represent more than just a bump. We do not expect that it will be appropriate to lower our policy rate until we have greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably down toward 2%. Given the strength of the economy and progress on inflation so far, we have time to let the incoming data guide our decisions on policy. We've held our policy rate at its current level since last July.
Pay attention here.
As shown in the individual projections that the FOMC released just 2 weeks ago, my colleagues and I continue to believe that the policy rate is likely at its peak for this tightening cycle.
Look at that.
If the economy
Market's starting to move
broadly as we expect, most FOMC participants see it as likely to be appropriate to begin lowering the policy rate at some point this year. Of course, that outlook is still quite uncertain, and we face risks on both sides. Reducing rates too soon or too much could result in a reversal of the progress we've seen on inflation and ultimately require even tighter policy to get inflation back to 2%. But easing policy too late or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. As progress on inflation continues and labor market tightness eases, these risks continue to move into better balance. As conditions evolve, monetary policy is well positioned to confront either of these risks. We are making decisions meeting by meeting, and we'll do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. And that brings me to my second topic. The Fed has been assigned 2 goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. Our success in delivering on these goals matters a great deal to all Americans. To support our pursuit of these goals, Congress granted the Fed a substantial degree of independence in our conduct of monetary policy. Fed policymakers serve long terms that are not synchronized with election cycles. Our decisions are not subject to reversal by other parts of the government other than through legislation. This independence both enables and requires us to make our policy decisions without consideration of short-term political matters. Such independence for a federal agency is and should be rare. In the case of the Fed, independence is essential to our ability to serve the public. The record shows that independent central banks deliver better economic outcomes. We recognize that we need to continually earn this grant of independence, and we do so by carrying out our work with technical competence and objectivity in a transparent and accountable manner, and by sticking to our knitting. By technical competence, I mean that the Fed policymakers use the most up-to-date information and research to deepen our understanding of the ever-evolving economy and to reliably deliver on our assigned goals. We're supported by a highly capable staff. We also draw on the insights and experiences of a wide array of business, academic, community, and labor leaders, as well as others engaged in the economy. And by objective, I mean that our analysis is free from any personal or political bias in service to the public. We will not always get it right. No one does. But our decisions will always reflect our painstaking assessment of what is best for our economy in the medium and longer term, and nothing else. Transparency and accountability are fundamental for any government agency in a democracy, but are especially important for one granted policy independence. The Fed has a special obligation to explain ourselves clearly, to describe what we're doing and why we're doing it. We're always striving to improve this communication, and it is a job that is never complete. But we've come a long way. Before 1994, the FOMC did not even announce monetary policy decisions. Today we announce those decisions and we explain the thinking behind them in our post-meeting statement and press conference. We publish detailed minutes of our deliberations and a quarterly summary of economic and policy projections of each FOMC participant. We publish a monetary policy report twice a year, and the chair appears before Congress to present that report and to answer any and all questions that are on the minds of our oversight committee members. In 2020, we completed a year-long public review of our monetary policy framework, and late this year, we will begin just such another review. My colleagues and I explain our views on the economic outlook and monetary policy in speeches like this one and in visits to communities around the country as part of
So far, it's the same old from Papa Powell, which is a good thing. It's a good sign.
Transparency is an affirmative and proactive commitment to the public. Lastly, to maintain the public's trust, we also need to avoid mission creep. Our nation faces many challenges, some of which directly or indirectly involve the economy. Fed policymakers are often pressed to take a position on issues that are arguably relevant to the economy, but are not within our mandate, such as, for example, particular tax and spending policies, immigration policy, and trade policy. Climate change is another current example. Policies to address climate change are the business of elected officials and those agencies that they have charged with this responsibility. The Fed has received no such charge. We do, however, have a narrow role that relates to our responsibilities as a bank supervisor. The public will expect that the institutions that we regulate and supervise will understand and be able to manage the material risks that they face, which over time are likely to include climate-related financial risks. We will remain alert to the risk that there will be pressure to expand that role over time, but we are not, nor do we seek to be, climate policymakers. In short, doing our job well requires that we respect the limits of our mandate. Thank you. I'll stop there and look forward to our discussion. Thanks.
So far, so good, guys. So far, so good.
Thank you very much, Chair Powell, for those remarks and for taking some time to be with us and talk to us today. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today. I think we have a lot of stuff to talk about, so I'm going to get right into it. Before I get started, I just want to also thank you to the audience for sending questions over. What I've done is I've tried to organize the conversation around two themes. One, we'll start by talking about the macroeconomy, and then you have been shared through a very tumultuous period over the last 5 years, and I want to talk about the leadership challenges around that. So let me just dive right into it, pick up on something you started talking about, which is inflation. 2 years ago, we had inflation readings close to 6-7%. We've come down to 3% last Friday. The PCE inflation index, the personal consumption expenditure inflation index, which is something that the Fed often speaks about, came in at 2.8%. We've had a conversation about this. There's so many factors that have been play in the economy over the last couple of years. I wonder if you can just spend some time talking to us about what you think are the key factors that have brought inflation down over the last 2 years.
Sure. So I think I'll start with where we think the inflation came from. So what is actually different this time, at the risk of making that statement, is that this inflation wasn't strictly just a question of demand overheating and the Fed coming in and having to suppress demand. That's been the more typical pattern, perhaps on the back of a shock such as the oil price shock and that kind of thing. This episode actually also involved, as everyone will recall, the collapse of the supply side in a lot of ways. So supply chains stopped working. There were shortages of critical things like semiconductors, which turned out you couldn't make cars. I think many of us might not have realized how many semiconductors go into a car.
Yeah.
In addition, there was a major labor force shock. So we lost several million people out of the labor market. So that we had a very severe labor shortage. So it was a supply side issue, as well as overheated demand from the closing and then reopening of the economy at a time when rates were low and fiscal policy was very supportive of demand. So we had both of those things. And therefore, if those were the causes, what we needed to see was both the unwinding of the pandemic-related distortions to both the supply and demand in the economy, and also the effects of tight monetary policy. So today, what we think we're seeing as inflation has come down sharply over the last year is those two factors working together. And they do work together. We think that tight monetary policy weighing on demand actually gives the supply side a better chance to recover. And 2023, of course, was a year, as I mentioned, of very significant supply side recovery and expansion.
And what are the factors that you're keeping an eye on, say, over the next few years, maybe the next year or two, that might play out in the inflation picture?
I should also mention inflation expectations, which in our framework and in the thinking of most monetary economists, people think that having the public expect inflation to return to 2% despite it moving up, that's a very important factor in bringing inflation back down. In a sense, if people believe that price setters and wage setters in the economy, if they believe that inflation will be 2%, then that'll actually happen. So as we look ahead, though, one question is how much more juice is there to come out of the supply side recovery? We got a very large increase in population last year, which may have helped with inflation. It certainly helped with output, and it increased the potential output. At the same time, the economy is growing 3.1% last year, or around that. We also had inflation coming down sharply. So there may be more supply side gains to be had. Surveys of businesses still show difficulties in hiring people, difficulties in getting the inputs that they need for their businesses. So there's some more benefit there. We also think that monetary policy is tight. It's weighing on interest-sensitive spending in the economy. So, for example, durable goods, surveys of consumers will say that it's a tough time to buy durable goods because rates are high. You also see the labor market rebalancing because you can look at demand in the labor market as well as supply, but you see demand reflected in lower job openings, a very small increase in unemployment, in wages moving back down toward more sustainable levels. So we think those two forces that I mentioned will be the ones we'll be looking for. And the thing we'll be looking at, of course, is the incoming data on inflation as those affect the outlook. And the same thing about the labor market. What's happening in the labor market? Does it suggest that the labor market is continuing its progress, and it's made substantial progress, to get back to a sustainable level of wage growth and balance between supply and demand?
Can I just dig into the inflation expectations point you mentioned? An analogy that people drew a couple of years ago was to the high inflation episode of the 70s, where we had a high inflation period that then ended up shifting expectations, and through the wage price mechanism ended up leading to a sustained period of high inflation. In the current situation, I guess I have two questions. How concerned are you about maybe inflation getting stuck in the upper twos, around 3? Could that last mile be very hard because inflation expectations getting stuck? And then relatedly, are there things you're looking at to tell you, to signal to you that that is an issue or isn't an issue?
Right. So as I mentioned, inflation expectations we think are an important part of driving actually inflation. We want them to be at levels that are consistent with 2% inflation over time, not 3%, but 2%, not 2.5%. The good news is that that's where they are right now and pretty much have been for some time. And we look at surveys of businesses, households, forecasters. We look at other kinds of measures of inflation expectations, model-based and things like that. We also look at market-based. The market is always buying and selling inflation protection, and you can get from that expectation of or assessment of what markets expect. And all of those are pretty consistently saying that the public does believe, and it's a good thing because it's true, that inflation will go back down to 2%. So that's very assuring, but that's partly because of the very strong action that we took and also because of our ongoing commitment to actually return inflation to 2% over time. So, and that is our commitment, by the way. But over time, so I would say it would be a concern if inflation expectations were not to be consistent with the outcome that we seek. But the good news is they're not, and I think our commitment is understood and respected and believed by the public, and that's as it should be.
Let me flip to the other side of the equation. We've had employment, economic activity that remained quite strong. The unemployment rate it's remained below 4% for the last 2 years. And this is during a period in which you've took the funds rate from 0% to 5.3% in about as fast a rate hike cycle as we've seen in history. A year ago, many people were talking about possibility of recession. That hasn't happened. Again, you made some remarks about this, but I wonder if you can just go a little bit more into this. Why hasn't this happened? Why have we achieved what looks like a soft landing, which is inflation coming down, unemployment remaining low? What are the factors that have played out? And then the related question, do we think this will continue to happen over the next year or two?
Yeah, so I guess I've always had the view and always said that because of the unusual origins of this inflation and its differences from other prior episodes, there was a path to getting inflation back down, restoring price stability, getting inflation back down sustainably to 2% without the kind of large job losses and increases in unemployment that have been typical of prior tightening cycles. And the reason, again, was that some part of this was independent of demand. If you have to get all of the inflation reduction gains from suppressing demand, the chances are that will involve that will weigh on employment and economic activity pretty significantly. But here we had the situation for semiconductors. You couldn't buy a car at the very time when people wanted cars because they were moving to the suburbs, because they didn't want to ride on public transportation because of COVID. At that precise time, the supply of cars went down dramatically because of the shortage. So what happens is the prices went way up. That's how the market clears in our economy. So on the other side of that, though, without respect to demand, once the semiconductor supply comes back, you should come right back down that curve, and you could, in principle, get inflation down significantly without just ignoring demand for a second. So I always thought that was possible, and I would say something like that appears to be happening. Sorry. So then your question is, how did that happen? So more recently, we expected that to happen at the very beginning, and that's why we thought the inflation was transitory, meaning it would go away quickly without much effort from us. That turned out not to be the case. And we thought then that was in 2021. In 2022, we thought the supply side would recover more. It really didn't, and I certainly began to wonder whether that was going to happen. And then it really happened in 2023. Right about the time we were almost ready to give up on supply side recovery, you got this significant increase in labor force participation, accompanied by a significant move up in immigration, and you also got the unwinding of the supply side problem. So what's happening is when that happens, potential output is going up significantly. The economy's productive capacity. So you have a situation where productive capacity is going up even more than actual output. And so the economy actually isn't becoming tighter, which it ordinarily would. It's actually becoming a little looser, and you're seeing inflation come down. Very unusual situation. The pandemic has been, a textbook of unusual, unexpected developments and situations. But that really is the story. And then Arvin, the question is, how much more are we going to get out of the supply side recovery, and how much will fall to demand? And we just don't know the answer to that. We're not going to prematurely assume that there's no more progress to be made on the supply side. Indeed, the evidence is that there probably is more gain to be had there.
You had mentioned immigration has been a big part of the last year or two in terms of the supply side. Can you just expand on that? Is that how important is that relative to supply chain? Where do you see that playing out over the next year or two?
So I need to start by saying that the Fed is not an immigration policymaker, and don't comment on those who do have that assignment or the policies that they make. It's really we're just calling the balls and strikes on the economy as we see them. And so from that standpoint, our economy's been short labor, and probably still is. If you talk to, and we talk to a lot of business
Definitely
people,
is.
it's still difficult to hire for many companies. So we've needed more people. So what happened over the course of last year is, to a much greater extent than had been thought, immigration moved up quite a bit over the last 2 years. And this is typically the Census Bureau does all this estimating. The Congressional Budget Office actually went and took a different path and talked to the people who work at the border and that kind of thing, and got a much higher estimate, which now many groups have gone out to validate. And I would say it's clear there's something there. The numbers are actually higher. And that actually explains what we've been asking ourselves, which is how can the economy have grown over 3% in a year where almost every outside economist was forecasting a recession? An overwhelming majority anyway were forecasting a recession for 2023. Not only did that not happen, we had better than 3% growth. So really a remarkable performance, and some part of that is that there are significantly more people working in the country, and but then how does inflation come down? It's because the capacity of the economy has actually moved up perhaps more than the actual output. So it's a bigger economy, but not a tighter one. Really an unexpected and unusual thing. Again, we don't make judgment calls, but that's what we're seeing.
So it's interesting in this discussion we've had about inflation and unemployment. We have talked about real factors, immigration, supply chain healing. That's the stuff that seems to have played out. We haven't really talked about interest rates per se, which is of course the primary tool of the Federal Reserve. It looks from the outside like the interest rate sensitivity of the economy in this cycle has been very muted, very different than in the past. There's also, you look at the economy, that look like there's very differential impacts across different parts of the economy. The housing market, people have long-term fixed rate mortgages, so interest rate pass-through there is very low. Here in Silicon Valley, we have early stage growth businesses where the cost of capital is affected by the higher rates, and there it looks like we have a much bigger impact. So I wonder if you can speak about the interest rate sensitivity of the economy in this cycle, and then another question, a related question, which is we have differential impact across the economy. How do you think about balancing the impact of interest rate hikes on different sectors?
So
Good question.
I guess the headline for me would be that I do think monetary policy is working, and working broadly as expected. I think you can point to sectors of the economy, and you mentioned a couple. So if you're a household that has a low interest mortgage, you're not feeling the effect of higher mortgage rates. And many companies as well took the opportunity to term out their debt before rates went up. So you have a lot of companies that have longer term fixed rate debt at pretty low rates, and they're not as affected by it. That's all true. At the same time, again, if you look at interest sensitive spending, either in housing or durable goods, you're seeing very significant effects there. And I do think you see the economy rebalancing. So I think it's not right and maybe too soon to conclude that there's some significant disconnect there in terms of monetary policy transmission. But it still leaves the question of how the economy can have grown over 3% during a year in which the federal funds rate is at a quarter-century high. Why wouldn't growth have been lower? And to me, the answer to that is the supply side recovery. I think that's what people need to understand, is that you have this force from outside. It's not just interest rates and demand. You've got a supply side recovery that is creating new demand and new supply. And that's why you get a number like 3.1% at the same time inflation is coming down. One of the reasons why. So I think that's really the story. It's not that the policy isn't restrictive, and it's not that the economy is not responsive to rates. It's that we've had this outside force that is temporarily affecting that.
So if I benchmark Fed policy right now, we have rates at 5.3%. Inflation is running a little bit under 3. That's like a 2.5% real interest rate. That's really the real cost of borrowing. Compared this to pre-pandemic, we had real rates of close to 0, maybe 0.5%, sometimes negative. So we've gone from a very low rate environment to a very high rate environment. Policy looks tight right now. Another benchmark. I don't know if my colleague John Taylor is here, but the Taylor rule is a typical benchmark we use for thinking about a central bank policy. And by the Taylor rule, policy rates right now should be around 4. So policy does look quite restrictive right now. And I think in talking about where policy is right now, you've said that the risks are balanced. Why continue to have tight policy in an environment in which the risks are balanced?
Huge drop in the market there. We're down to 520.04. Keep an eye on the market. Big drop there.
I would go back to what I said in my remarks to start, which is we think the risks are two-sided. So there's a risk of if you cut too soon, the risk is that the progress on inflation will stop, or that even it will reverse. And we've seen that in some historical, particularly in the 70s. We don't think that's what's happening here at all, but that's a risk that we have to manage. The other risk is that we wait too long or move too slowly. Once we do move, and in that case you have weakening in the labor market and economic output. So we're trying to steer between those two risks. Obviously, we're trying to be in the middle and get the timing right. It's very challenging. There is no risk-free path, but and I think we're in a position to address the economy moving in either of those.
Big dump here, down to 519.40. Keep an eye on that chart, ladies and gentlemen.
Too soon really is that the economy, really does. The deflation does move up, and then it really would be quite disruptive if we were to have to then come back in. We will do what we have to do to get inflation down to 2%. But again, it's about balancing those risks. It's never the case that you can confidently look at the baseline and say this
It's
is
across the board as well.
It's always
Sorry for interrupting.
Having a baseline understanding, but then knowing what the risks are and having the committee be in a position to be able to address those should they materialize. And I think we're very much in that position now.
Maybe I can just follow up on that. So I'm going to ask a question about, is there a signal or a data point that you're paying particular attention to over the next year? And I'm going to ask it this way. So if you had a crystal ball that you knew could perfectly answer one question about the next 12 months, what question would you ask? What's the thing you really want to know?
Sorry, there's no one thing. It really is. We have a dual mandate. You're asking me to be single-minded about the dual mandate.
No, just a kind of a data point that you think is
Get him, Powell. Get him, Papa.
Can't do that. No, I mean, we have to, I would say this. In our framework, the two goals, price stability and maximum employment, are equal under the law. But our framework literally says that if you're very far from achieving one of the goals and the other one is pretty much at goal or even better than goal, then you focus on the one that's far from goal. This is obvious, right? So, and that's what we did after inflation came up in March of 21, and then we really had a very tight focus. And you heard us talking about, getting inflation under control. But as inflation has come down, the two things are moving back into balance. And we're not a single mandate bank. The key thing I'll end with, though, is price stability is it gives us the ability to achieve both goals. If we don't have price stability, then we're not going to have these long periods of tight labor markets which benefit everyone. What we saw in the 10-year, 8-month expansion that ended with the pandemic was, for the last 2 or 3 years, the people at the lower end of the income spectrum were getting the largest wage increases. And you saw the gaps between black and white unemployment go to historic lows. So a tight labor market over a long period of time does enormous social good. And that's what we all want to do, is we want to get back to that. For that, you need price stability. But they were, so the two of them actually are quite complementary.
I'm going to shift from just talking about the near term to the thinking about the longer term for the U.S. economy. We've had a pretty big shift in growth expectations for long-run growth. This comes out from the Fed's own projections as well as from economic forecasters' projections. For 15 years ago, long-term growth forecasts were 2.8%, 3%. Pre-pandemic, they've been below 2. That's kind of where they've been for long-term growth forecasts. That's where your own forecasts have been. Why do you think that is? Why long-term growth at 2%? We're sitting in Silicon Valley. AI is all the buzz here. We've had high growth over the last few years. Is 2 a reasonable number? Is it possible we could go back to the 2.83% that we had in the early 2000s?
Well, let me start by saying that sort of every bit of the economy is difficult to forecast. There isn't one that's more difficult to forecast than productivity, for example, which is one of the key elements of longer-term growth. So very, very, very uncertain. I mean, basically, what longer-term growth is a function of growth in hours worked and of output per hour. And hours worked is really a function of demographics and more than anything else. And productivity, output per hour, is highly unpredictable. So I think people lowered their longer run growth expectations to around, I guess, 1.8% is the median, something below 2%. That's given what had been our very low population growth and expectations that productivity might be 1.5%, 1%, 1.5% kind of thing, productivity growth in output per hour. That's a pretty good place to be. We've had higher productivity than that recently. And the question is it going to be a sustained thing? Are we going to enter into a new period of higher productivity? That would be great. It is productivity growth that lifts, all boats, generation upon generation. And, so people argue AI can be that effect. Some people are arguing that, there were a lot of business starts at the beginning of the pandemic and during the pandemic as Americans went out and started businesses at that time. And also that you've seen you've seen a lot of change in the labor force. So people moving, quitting, going to better jobs that might be better suited to their skills. But all of those things, they could become a longer run productivity increase or not. Those might just be the things that we need to get 1.5% productivity. And it is unknowable. And particularly with AI, the range of potential outcomes, it should increase productivity. Everyone sees that. But that's not what we're seeing in the numbers now. It's too soon for AI to be affecting, I think, productivity numbers. But, the logic of it is that it could actually, increase productivity. And then the question will be, what does it do to labor? Is it going to replace labor or augment labor or both? And if so, in what proportion? So hard to say about longer run growth. But, of course, it would be great if that were the case.
And then just to follow up, we talked about this before. Do you feel like you need to take a stand on this in policy making it correct?
No, I mean, so our focus, the things that are really important to the U.S. economy over time are productivity, immigration, even trade policy, industrial, the things that we're doing, industrial policy that is now a thing. Those are important to the longer run growth and economic well-being of Americans. And what we do is we try to move the economy towards stable prices and maximum employment through the business cycle. That's what we can do with business rate, with monetary policy. We are also a crisis responder. We're a really important crisis responder. We can get there quickly. We have great tools for it. So that's a key thing that we do. We also regulate and supervise the banks, and it's important. And we look after financial stability. So all those are very important things. But they're not things that affect the longer run potential output of the United States. So honestly, though, the question of what will be the equilibrium interest rate, the neutral interest rate going forward, doesn't really matter for policy today. We're really asking about once the pandemic is well and truly behind us, and we're well into the AI investment boom and the effects of AI, what will that look like? And it doesn't really matter that much for getting inflation down to 2% while keeping the economy growing and the labor market strong.
Can I shift tax and talk about some of the challenges of leading the Fed through the last 5 years? So, just in our discussion, and it's clear from looking at the world, you've had so many different shocks. The economy has behaved in so much unusual ways over the last few years. You were appointed Fed chair in 2018. I remember pre-pandemic, the dominant concern of the Fed was low inflation, not high inflation. It was having inflation below target, below the 2% target. COVID happened. We've gone in a completely different direction. So can you just speak about the challenges of taking an organization that was focused on one thing to focusing on something completely different?
Yes, it's certainly been a turbulent time, I will say. To Dean Levin's points, it's been really a lot of things and things that weren't expected. You know, for 20 plus years around the world, economies suffered from lower interest rates, lower inflation, slow growth, low productivity, bad demographics, and a lot of monetary economists were working on how do you make your tools work at a time when you're going to be bounded by zero, and you won't be able to cut and support the economy. So this was that was a big thing. And then the inflation that came, it really arrived in the first quarter of 2021 was a surprise to most people. And again, the macroeconomists generally thought that it would go away over time. Not everyone. There were some concerns expressed, and ultimately it is coming down significantly. So that was, we had to pivot on that, and we did. When it became clear, really in the fall of 2021, it became clear through the labor market data, the inflation data, the growth data, that the economy was not moving back toward price stability. And we pivoted, and when we pivoted, we really moved. So because, it was the right thing to do. So the good news about monetary policy is it can move quickly. The emergency tools we have, as I mentioned, are agile compared to other government policies, and they have a significant effect on the economy. So I think we've gotten to what is, knock on wood, a pretty good place. We're using our tools now to try to bring inflation down the rest of the way to 2% while keeping the economy strong and the labor market strong as well.
I mean, the other side of this tumultuous period that we've been through is the external pressure from the Fed, from outside over where to set interest rates. And you have faced this pressure over the last 6 years, including from the former president. So how do you navigate the decision-making of the Fed in the larger scheme of pressures coming in from the outside?
So the thing is, internally we have peace of mind on this because everybody who works at the Fed knows that we're going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to do it for economic reasons, and that's it, as I mentioned in my remarks. And I mean, I think you can go back and anybody can read the verbatim transcripts of the things that we discuss during. It doesn't matter what the election calendar is saying. Whatever's happening in the economy, those are the decisions. We make decisions based on the analysis that I described in my remarks. So I think we know that. So it becomes, but it's a communication issue that people need to understand that that's what we do. It's always what we do. If you look at the modern historical record, you'll see that the Fed has been prepared to move or not move and do what it thinks is the right thing for the economy in the medium and longer term without regard to kind of outside considerations. And it's important to just have people know that, which is why I brought it up. I don't have concerns that it's going to be a problem for us because we're going to do what the right thing is for the economy over time, and my colleagues and I are tightly focused on that.
Maybe you can just say a little bit more about that. I mean, you're praised by many people in your ability to build consensus. You've served in different White House administrations with different political ideologies. How do you do that in practice? Do you have any advice for all of us? And
so it boils down to two things. One is, we have a specific mandate. Stick to that mandate. Focus on that mandate, and don't be dragged into partisan political fights around. I mean, when I testify, people are always trying to get me and my colleagues to support their perspective on fiscal issues or immigration issues, and they think of an economic hook and they try to. But we just don't do that. We stay with it. That's part of it. The other part of it just is I spend a lot of time in our system of government. Oversight comes through Congress. In a parliamentary system, it's through the elected government. But because that's the same people who are in the parliament. But for us, it's not the administration that has legal oversight responsibility. It's the Congress, the House and the Senate, and particularly the two oversight committees, one in the House, one in the Senate. And so my colleagues and I spend a lot of time, and we don't go up there to blast talking points at people. We want to hear what they're thinking, and we want to listen carefully and respectfully and tell them what we're thinking. And I think people appreciate that. That's the thing. Same thing internally. I think when you listen respectfully and understand what people are saying and try to think about how to incorporate that thinking into what you're doing, for most people, most of the time, that's going to be enough. And so they can go along with things that they don't 100% support, but they feel like they were heard, or they're not going to maybe criticize quite as harshly as they would, because they realize that you're doing this in good faith to the absolute best of your ability and based on the actual facts and what we know about the ever-evolving economy.
Can I just ask about how your own background has helped in this process? So you are a person who has shifted between the public and the private sector over the course of your career. And you're a lawyer by training. You don't have an economics PhD. You're running an organization which is mostly PhD or many PhD economists. So can you just speak about how your background has helped you navigate this?
Sure. So when I graduated from college, I had no plan other than this idea that I liked what I saw of the careers of people like George Shultz or Cyrus Vance, for example. And that the idea was these were people who had a mainly private sector career but served in the government at intervals and were able to do public service. I grew up in Washington, D.C. My family was not involved in any of this really, but this is what I observed, and I thought I would like to do that. And by some miracle, that's kind of what happened. It wasn't careful planning. So I always wanted to do public service, and I wound up doing that. I served as an aide on the Hill. I was all these different things that I've done. So that's how that happened.
And then I'll ask one last question for this. Do you have any advice for the students in this room whose interests are to move between public and private sector?
So I think that's a great plan for people. People have different tolerance levels for volatility. So I quit the law and went into investment banking, quit investment banking, went into private equity, quit private equity and went into public service, So if you're willing to tolerate volatility and steep learning curves, then if you're that person, then that's a great way to go. The other thing I'll say, though, is I have really found that when I was a partner in a private equity firm, I asked the head of the investment area, what do you look for? It's all about picking good CEOs and good business models. What do you look for in a good CEO? And the answer was, there's no one model. And that's really important. I have seen very different people be successful in leadership roles. Very, very different people. And it's in, I don't know if it's in every person, but it's in a lot of people to find your own way to lead. And you don't have to be one way or another. I can think of one person at the Fed who was
Jordan.
She had a way
I love you, Cub.
of being a very soft talker, and by the end of the meeting, everyone was leaving there thinking, how do I do her bit? How do I do what she said? It's like, I want to do that. It's in everybody, and you should have the self-confidence. What I experienced when I first had to lead things was complete lack of self-confidence. Oh my God, I'm not ready to do this. And I think that's very common for people. I think people get more coaching now, but I would just say, be confident in your own abilities to lead and take things on and take risk, because that will. That's, if I could say that to something to my younger self, I think that would be it.
Jay, we're running on time here, and there's lots more stuff we could talk about, but I'm mindful of time. So let me just first of all thank you on behalf of Stanford for being here, engaging us in this conversation. It's been very stimulating. I know I learned a lot, and I hope we all learned a lot. And again, so thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Arvin.
All right, Mr. Papa Powell came, he saw, and he spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, one of my biggest takeaways, because he talked a lot about the same exact things as he did before. Look at that handsome man walking off there. Beautiful. Papa Powell, ladies and gentlemen, we all know and love him. Anyway, old Papa Powell, he came on, he talked about the same things that we heard a couple weeks ago. Okay, he talked about bringing that Fed interest rate down to not the interest rate, I'm sorry, but inflation. He wants it down to 2%. He knows that it is possible to bring it down to 2% or get it as close as he possibly can. Okay, that is a big, very, very big and very, very important thing here when we're talking about the Fed interest rate. We want to be able to bring down the interest rates, right? Right now we're at 5.5 and we want to bring it down lower. If we want to see that lower, to see a more booming economy, and we're expected to slash rates 3 times by the end of the year, then we need to see the overall economy starting to have a little bit of pain, a little bit of hurt. So with his expectations and the things that he's seeing and the thing that he's been talking about for the past, well, hell, a couple months, guys, is he's staying the course. He's going to keep everything the same until the data comes out showing him that there is reason to cut. Now, I looked at the Fed rate hikes. It almost looks like in May we are not going to cut. We're looking for more of an April cut. Okay, the April cut is looking, I think right now, is around 36%. Now, by the time we get to April, with more data, with 2 more months worth of data, that might show us that the Fed might be more apt to cut. Okay. But one key takeaway that I heard him talking about this time that the interviewer extracted as using good questions, not forcing him to say the same thing twice, was simply put, why was the growth in the economy up 3.1%? We expected to grow. We expected not to grow. We expected to come back down. We expected the economy to, with so many people being so concerned about a recession, why did we come back up? The biggest thing that I took from this meeting today was that with the growth being over 3.1%, the supply side was higher and we are creating a new demand. Why? Here's the multiple reasons why he stated. Because AI created a lot of new businesses. It created this huge uplift in demand. Okay, so with the new jobs and people gaining access to newer jobs, quitting their old jobs and gaining new jobs was a beautiful thing, right? Also, with all the population, the huge increase in population here, guys, that created a whole new demand in its own, which is absolutely beautiful to hear and to see. Because personally, when I thought about the population growing, I thought about just how much of an issue this was going to be in general. So looking at everything that he's saying, he's still staying the course. He is still expecting to be able to lower interest rates. He didn't say anything about not being able to cut. He still expects to cut at least 3 of those interest rates. If we can cut 3 times by the end of the year, this market is still going to look bullish. Now, we talked about the bounce off the 21-day moving average. We got that today. Okay, we talked about looking at this 10-day moving average, watching price action. And if we break this 10-day, we are going to come down to a 21-day moving average. We bounced off this 21-day moving average. And then this morning, we got the PMI data. The PMI data showed that the economy is starting to slow. That might sound bad, but for the overall market, it is a beautiful thing. If you have a 401k, if you have a Roth IRA, or any long-term investments, you can clearly see the overall market taking a foothold and moving to the north side. So now the market is sitting at 520.51. It is a beautiful thing, ladies and gentlemen. It is a beautiful thing. So no matter where you sit in the market, unless you're a perma bear, this is the only person that's going to get mad with this data and with this news. So this clearly is taking a good foothold and looking absolutely bullish for the overall market. So keep in mind, guys, when we look at the overall market and you see a pullback in these days, I don't want to hear anybody saying, oh, we're coming down, we're bearish, we're going to break, we're going to, whatever you bears talk about out there. We are on a beautiful bull run since 2023 of the October lows. We are sitting at 520.53 currently, and boy, do I love it. Last week, we just hit all-time new highs at 524.61 with that Fed rate hike decision to stay at 5.5. So watching this, analyzing this, ingesting the data, ingesting the news, learning a little bit more today from Papa Powell's speech is a beautiful thing. Let's go to the comment section and see what we have here. So Sergio Martinez, hey, what's going on? He said, hey, yo, how's the market treating you today? I say, I only took a few different takes. I took a small bid on the TQs because I called the 30-day moving average here. I wanted to see the bounce. So last night at the end of the day, I ended up taking a small bid on TQQQ, nothing too big. I'm so sick of calling the bounce and I don't ever get in for the bounce. So here we are in the TQQQs. We're up a small amount. By the end of the day, I'll probably take half of those shares out, obviously securing in some of those profits. And we will be sure to keep on staying the course. I'm going to hold till all-time new highs for that last piece, especially with that new data coming out. So yeah, I'm doing okay in the market. We also took a nice long on VKTX. Let's see how that's doing. So VKTX, we played. You can see where I got in here on the green area. We played previous day's break. Shout out to Danny. Danny, thank you so much for letting me know about this beautiful thing, this beautiful trade here. The only issue with this trade is we didn't see any volume coming in for this day, so we're getting a push up, but it's on lighter volume. So I'm not too impressed with this. I don't care for this trade as much. So instead of using previous day's lows, as I usually do, we moved that stop up to today's lows. Okay, I moved the stop up to $76, and we're going to see how that wants to play out. But the overall market is looking very good. We got Covey, good, my boy, the man, the myth, the legend, Covey. He says PRCH and CECO are doing very well for him. Yeah, we were watching this in the Discord, which, by the way, if you guys want to join the Discord, everything is absolutely free. Absolutely free. You can join that Discord. A couple of you are already in there that are talking in the chat right now. But Discord's absolutely free. If you click on the description down below, there is a LinkedIn to all of my affiliates. We have Facebook. We got it all. We got it all, guys. And actually, while you're here, why don't we just go ahead and look at my screen right here, guys? If you haven't already, smash this like button here. I think we're up to 10 or 12 likes. I'm not sure. Smash that like button. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We love to bring you the news. We love to bring you the most recent economic data. We absolutely love to do this here. So go ahead and smash that like button, guys. Yeah, we'll just keep that short. Next up, John Smith says, great info. Thank you very much, John. I do appreciate that. We try to bring you the best. We try to stay up to date. If you didn't see me, I was taking notes because I'm trying to learn as we go too, because if you aren't learning, you're a loser. That's my motto. You are a loser unless you're learning, guys. So take notes. Make sure we pay attention during these Papa Powell speeches because we want to ride on those giant shoulders. He knows what's going on. We want to know what's going on. So if we keep in on those keen ears, those keen talks, the more you know, the more money we can make. Correct? So Sergio Martinez says, that's good to hear. Took an L today. I was looking for a pullback on the NASDAQ 100. Kept getting wrecked. Finally found a good move. Negative 2/3 of a loss on my current L. Hey, you know what? What's great about that is risk management. That's the biggest thing here, Sergio Martinez. So you live to trade another day. That's absolutely beautiful to hear. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. Amen, brother. We live to see. Hey, and look at that. I said it. You said it. We said it together. That's beautiful. I have only taken one options trade. I don't care for options. I like to manage my risk using stocks. I don't like to buy options. I don't like the time decay. I don't like trying to understand your alpha theta data Mickey Fickies, okay? That's just not for me, but I'm not against it. I have a lot of traders that like to use that leverage in options to trade. It's a beautiful thing, and I think if you need to use that leverage, go for it. I personally don't need to use the leverage. I already have enough capital that I don't even use the majority of the capital that I have, but I will definitely use options as leverage in the long run if I need to, just simply put, because there might come across a time where I want to get into a stock that I cannot get enough of. And if that comes up, like let's say NVIDIA's 500, if I ever see that break again that we seen long ago that I preached to all of my friends and family, when I seen this 500 break area on the S&P 500, that I should have loaded the bag and then never stopped out till that 10-day moving average broke. Okay. And next time I get a beautiful trade that I stalk like that, I'm not taking chump change on it. I'm going to go big or go home. Now, I made some money. Don't get me wrong. I made some money, just like I'm sure everybody has on NVIDIA, but I could have made a lot more. And that's the shoulda, woulda, coulda in me that's talking right now, so we can keep on keeping on. So, but yeah, guys, it was an absolute great day for the overall market so far because we had that bounce off the 21-day moving average. Then old Papa Powell came out and then just further pushed that to the north side. So I absolutely love to see that, and you should too if you have a 401k, a Roth IRA, any type of investment strategy. The one thing you want to see is the S&P going higher because you are going to be a part of that. Now let's take a look at the QQQs. We also seen a beautiful bounce off that 30-day moving average. That is what we want to see. This is your tech heavy ETF. This is what you want to see in the market, guys. This is what led the bull market back here, well back here in the October lows. This is what started to take off. This was what was relatively strong compared to the S&P 500. Sergio Martinez popped in to say, I am going to tap in with you, LoFi, to manage risk with stocks. I'm sure risk management is a little different from the way I trade futures market. You know, that's actually that's something that I would need to look into. I imagine that I am imagining that the risk management with the future side and the overall equities trading is probably pretty close to the same. But we actually get on our Discord every morning at 8 o'clock. And if the majority of us, not all of us, but the majority of us get on around 6, 7 o'clock, depending on whatever time everybody gets done with dinner, and we get on and we talk about risk management. We talk about the trades that we've taken. We like to get together. We like to do this in the Discord, and we do it live. We do it in front of you. We share our screens. We don't have anything that we hide in our Discord. There's no reason to hide because I'm no guru. I'm not here. I'm just a coach. I'm a risk management coach, as I like to say, because the best thing that you can do, the first edge that you should learn in the market is risk management. And if you argue with me, I don't want to hear it. Risk management is an edge in its own. So the first thing that I try to pass off onto newer traders is that risk management. And Bob Dan, Bob, say that 10 times fast. He'll tell you. He's a newer trader and he is seeing green today. I love to read that, Bob Dan, Bob. That's a beautiful thing, brother. So we'll definitely get on chat tonight around 6, 7 p.m. and we will go over why you are green. What did you do? I'm sure it started with risk management because we had a pre-market talk about exactly what he wanted to do. I wasn't too excited about the stocks that he was looking at, but what I was excited about is the fact that he used risk management to take those trades. So it's an absolute beautiful thing, guys. I'm so pumped to be here, and I'm so glad that we actually had some time to take out of our day to watch Papa Powell come out live. He came out live. He said what needed it to. And I tell you, it wasn't too much different than the last talks. The last talks when he was on there, the thing, the biggest thing with the last talks when he was on there is I absolutely hated the interview. The guy who interviewed him looked so, it was like a weasel. I feel like that's the best way. You know, I don't mean to talk crap about him. He may have interviewed Papa Powell way better than I could have interviewed him myself. But I will say this. When you're interviewing somebody and they make a point and it's a good point, the best thing for you to do is to articulate on that point, not say that again. Say that again, Papa Powell. Look into the cameras and say that again. I was like, man, don't do that to my Papa. Oh, Papa Powell's going to get mad and he's going to hit you with the Fed rate hammer. You know what I mean? Don't make this dude mad. Papa Powell's going to whip out the Fed rate hammer and knock us back up to 6.5. Goodness gracious, calm down, dude. Yeah, so I did not like the last interviewer, but this guy from, I believe it was Stanford, he asked a lot of beautiful questions. He wasn't trying to hound in on Papa Powell. He's not trying to make a name for himself. He already has a name for himself. And he didn't sound like a fool asking these questions. So it's good to see some of the same questions being asked, because if Papa Powell did answer them different, he may have articulated them different. He may have said something different, which would have led us into some other things to believe. You know, if he wanted to elaborate a little bit more about, you know, cutting rates, or if he wanted to elaborate a little bit more about how the population was affecting the overall market. But what the questions that were asked actually brought up about population, it made me realize that that new population brought new demand for new things and actually help increase and grow the economy, which is contrary to a lot of popular belief that if we have more people, we have more mouths to feed. Well, we also have a whole new demand there, and we create new supply. Daniel, what's going on, Daniel? It's good to see you, brother. Good morning, or good afternoon, actually. We're at 1:12. I better wake up, drink me some more go-go juice. Let's take a look at Root. I guess it's on fire. You know, I actually had, not Rot, Root. So Root is on fire. Look at this, up to 6707. Absolutely beautiful up here. Let me generate these cells here. Now, as you can see on the 1 minute up here at 6722, Root is just flying, guys. And if we look at the daily on Root, this was absolutely beautiful. It came up, it created this beautiful base. When it broke from this base, LoFiTraders, what we did is hopped in this baby and we played it. We got out of half of our shares, and when it came back down to break even, it ended up stopping me out here. And what's beautiful is I made money on Root, but I didn't take the re-break. So a lot of times we have these shakeout days, and it did. It shook me out. Now, goodness, that's why I love having proper risk management, because I still made money on this trade. But what I should have done was get back in here for rather a lower share size and held on, holding below or holding until it breaks below this 10-day moving average. We would still be in this. So if some of you in LoFi still holding Root, congratulations to you. That's absolutely beautiful to see. Currently in my positions, it is TQQQ. Did I say enough Qs? T with 3 Qs, which is the triple levered ETF for the QQQs, which is the tech heavy weighted ETF. And I'm also holding VKTX. We can take a look at those in a little bit. But yeah, Root is on fire, Bob Dan Bob, and it is nice to see. But keep in mind, guys, when we look at something that's this extended from the 10-day, just like it was here, we are expecting a pullback. Now, this thing might take off, but with my buy and sell rules, and one thing I like to preach here is I do not like to see anybody buying an extended stock. We want to see it pull back. We want to see it gravitate on top of one of these moving averages to show that it has a proper support, and then you can get in and know what your risk is. Andrew Royce says, I missed my sell opportunity when it dropped during the speech. Ah, man, I tell you. You know, I believe you were calling on SPY. And it came close to your call out there. I think you said 516. We actually came pretty close. We started heading down there, Andrew. You were pretty close on your analysis there, and we could have headed lower. But what's beautiful is the market is very, very resilient right now. Back up just under that 10-day moving average. It looks absolutely amazing. So it's good to see. So guys, just one more quick thing, really, really quick. Take a look at the screen here, guys. I want you to do me a huge favor. Smash this like button. Go ahead, smash that like button. Let's refresh this here and let's see where we're at. We're up to 6 likes. Let's try and get up to 8 before we take off here. So smash that like button for me. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, guys. It's really nice to see everybody in here. I do appreciate you joining me, and make sure you stick with us. Join the Discord, join the community, guys, because we love to bring you the news, the current GDP, PMI, the Fed rate hike decision. We bring it all in. Today we have another hot PMI video coming out to you for a short. So thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate you guys, and I hope. Oh, you called the 519, Andrew. Andrew, you called the 519. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, because I knew you were close. I knew it was close because it came very, very close. Actually, let's just zoom in here. Yeah, Andrew called that 519, and look at this, guys, 519.39. You were so close on that call, Andrew. You thought it was going to at least come down to that 519, so you were very, very close with that. Yeah, so sorry, I said 516, but that's just an upside down 6, so I was close enough. But yeah, things are looking good, guys. Absolutely love to see where the market is at right now. So thank you so much for joining me, guys, and we will see you very, very soon. If not, we'll see you in the morning at 8 a.m. in the Discord, between 8 and 8:15 on the Discord if you want to hear more, if you want to get a good market heads up, a market analysis for what's going on in the overall market. That's what we do every morning on the Discord. But if not, we'll see you tonight at 6 p.m. I will shoot out a beautiful Danny. You have it as Daniel H, so I call you Danny. But yeah, Daniel, D-A-N-I on VKTX. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Well, look at this. So Danny, if you weren't here earlier, I actually talked about this VKTX call out, brother. He was calling about the long after the break of previous high. Now, we didn't see a new higher low form on this downtrend here, which I like to see a new lower high made. Now we can look back here and say these are our new lower highs made back here. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. New lower high, new lower high, new lower high. But what I like to see on a downtrend is a new lower high somewhere put in here, and we don't have that. But what Danny was calling out is a break of this high. Now, this is the daily, so we're starting to see this a little better. So this break of this high right here, using previous day as our stop. Now, when Danny called this out, we got in this. Danny and I both did at the same time, which was beautiful because I messaged him and I said, hey man, VKTX. He said, yeah, I'm in it. And I said, I am too. Well, we held on to this thing. It pulled back a little bit. And when we noticed there wasn't much volume coming in, let's go ahead and look on this chart here for you guys. There wasn't a lot of volume coming in. Look here on the bottom right. Not a lot of volume coming in here at all, guys. Not a lot compared to previous days. This is the kind of volume you want to see, but to the upside when you're getting in at this area. Then when it came up, Danny was actually watching this price action very close at 79, and I actually had the time and sales on here, and we are seeing a lot of people buying up just below 79. So I ended up adding to this trade in this area. My average now ended up making it at 78.68, I believe. It moved up my average just ever so slightly. But now this push off this 78.50 area, beautiful, now sitting at 79.90. We would love to see this thing obviously have a continuation tomorrow morning and in the days to come. So yeah, absolutely awesome call there, Danny. You said add at anchored VWAP from the lows. Yes, you did. Actually, while you're here, I'll just bring up VTKS or VKTS. What am I thinking here? Hang on. VKTX. What am I thinking, guys? What am I thinking? Somebody correct me. VKTX. There we go. All right, now let me go ahead and pull the anchored VWAP so everybody's aware of anchored VWAP and what we were talking about from these lows. And when I say we're, I mean Danny specifically. That's where he added. I actually added. Oh, you're talking the add from these lows here, weren't you, Danny? Okay, cool. So we're talking intraday, the add from these lows. Where are we at? We're on the 1 minute. So where are the lows here? So I am pulling it off the lows, the lows of the lows. But if you're talking about for today's lows, that is going to be right here. So if we pulled anchor VWAP off of these lows here, you can see the add would be right exactly where Danny called it. Look at that. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. 78.57. Now, if we go back to our charts, you can see on here, 78.57 is right on that line. 78.57 is right about there, right where that green line is, Danny. That's actually right about where I took that breakout, which is previous day's high. And that's pretty much the same call out. It's the same call out. Yeah, from today's lows. I got you. Yeah, it took me a second to catch it, but we got it. We got it taken care of. Anyway, guys, I'm going to head out now. We got my boy waking up here in just a little while. I want to make sure everything's set up and ready to go for him now. But it was a beautiful day in the market. If you haven't already, hit that like, hit that subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. And we will see you in the Discord. If not, we'll see you at 6 tonight when I release the short. Other than that, I appreciate you guys. Take care. Have a good day. Love ya.